All right, so welcome back to Sociology 1. And sorry. So as I think I mentioned the other day, we're going to be getting into really what is sociology with a capital S. We started to get into that the other day, and we pointed out that it's the study of modern society. But sorry, my phone is not muting for some reason. See if I can fix that while I talk. And so what we and so what I was starting to tell you is that there are three different kinds of sociology, really, at least, and to really answer the question, what is sociology, we're going to have to look at all three kinds of sociology. And to begin to understand why are there three different kinds, it's good to go back to the very beginning of sociology's founding in Europe in the 19th century. And what we're going to suggest is that even though the three founding fathers of sociology disagreed on what was wrong with the modern world and why we should have sociology to study it, they all agreed that something was wrong with the modern world, that it certainly had brought new things. Remember, as we talked about, the modern world means things like industrialization, having factories making things instead of people making it by hand in small villages, people living in big cities rather than living in small villages in the countryside. People living with a bunch of other people of different races, religions, backgrounds in big cities versus living in much more similar kinds of villages where everybody's the same and same religion, same food and all of that. So it's this new modern world that people are living in. And sociology is a new field that's being developed to try and figure out, how can we make this modern world actually work for people? Because it was pretty clear that for a lot of people it wasn't working. I'm showing you here a picture of, what does this show? Anybody know what this picture I'm showing is showing us here? Why would I have this? Yeah.
Kids working in
Yeah,
factories?
exactly. Child labor is what we call it. And this comes from the Discovery Channel, or the History Channel, I'm sorry. And so it's all about child labor. You can find this. And child labor is still an issue. In fact, it became a pretty big issue during COVID and with a lot of migrants coming into the country and people being put to work. Some of you may have experienced child labor yourself. But back in, so I'm showing you some pictures here that are more or less the kinds of things that the founding fathers of sociology would have been aware of and seen. Fortunately, these pictures aren't that sad looking. People tend to smile for cameras. But if you were walking around England in, really Manchester, England, in, let's say, 1850s, what would you have seen? And so we're going to learn about Karl Marx and Emil Durkheim. And Max Weber. These are the quote-unquote founding fathers of sociology. As we're also going to learn, there were women who were studying the world at that time, and they helped found sociology. There were non-white men, non-upper class people that also contributed to the founding of the field. So we'll have to talk about them, but mainly for convenience reasons, but also for reasons having to do with the power of white males in our world. These are the three guys that have come to be known as the founding fathers of sociology, and I always put it in quotes because they're not really the founding fathers. There were other people, and also because that term founding father really comes from America, not from Europe. But it's helpful, I think, to think of them as fathers, as people struggling with the same sorts of questions around their world and trying to figure out, what to do about it. And these names, we mentioned Durkheim in here, so you might have heard that name. Karl Marx is the most famous. How many have ever heard of Marxism? Never heard of Marxism. Ever heard of communism? Who's ever heard of communism? So communism is a big ideology that our society, our capitalist society, is supposedly against. And certain countries like China have called themselves communist, and Russia used to call itself communist, and Cuba still calls itself communist. Karl Marx is known as the father of communism. And so in a lot of ways, he's considered a bad guy in American history. And there were times in American history where if you taught Karl Marx's beliefs in class, you would be arrested or kicked out of a job. And there's still people, Governor of Florida says, if you're teaching Karl Marx in Florida, we'll fire you. So these are supposedly very dangerous ideas to be sharing with young people that Karl Marx had. It's true that people who were Marxists, people who were communists, followers of Marx, have done quite a bit of bad things in the world, some of them. Some of you may have relatives or friends who come from countries they've come here escaping Marxists. So like Vietnam War, Vietnam was taken over by Marxists, and a lot of the Vietnamese people that live here are people that were leaving Vietnam to get away from Marxists. Or there are, Marxist parties in India. There are Marxists in Mexico and South America. And so one thing we should know about Karl Marx is he said, I'm not a Marxist. In other words, he once said, I don't follow my followers. In other words, people are doing things in my name that I don't necessarily agree with. That's one thing to keep in mind. Another to keep in mind is that Marx sort of had two sides of himself. One is a theorist, a guy studying the world and trying to figure out what's wrong with it and what would make it better. That's the Marx we're going to focus on. There was another Marx, the same guy, but he was an activist trying to change the world, being out there, being political, causing trouble. And that's the Marx that we're not going to spend too much time on. He was kicked out of Germany himself and spent his life in England because of his activism. But it's his scholarship, it's his theoretical work, his writings, that sociology claims as, one of the founding ways, founders of our field. Durkheim and Weber aren't as famous, although Weber's been getting a lot of attention recently, at least among scholars, because of what's going on in the world, all this changing in government and fights between totalitarianism and democracy. We'll talk about Weber later. But they weren't really doctors. But they all agreed that something was sick about the modern world. As you look at this modern world, it left behind the pre-modern world, and something wasn't quite right about it. And I'm trying to show you pictures to give a sense of what they saw. If you were walking around England at the time Marx and Engels, his writing partner, were writing, one of the first things they wrote was about the condition of the English working class. How did working people live in England at that time? And they didn't live well by our standards. The modern world was supposed to be better than the pre-modern world. But how were people living in England at this time? Well, if you went there right now in a time machine, first of all, you wouldn't know if it was day or night. Why wouldn't you know if it was day or night?
Wasn't it like really smoky?
Yeah, because the factories were all using coal to be powered, and coal smoke is really dark black smoke, and the whole part of Manchester, England was always enveloped in black smoke, so it was always nighttime. If you walked to work to your factory, well, when you looked in the factory, you would see lots of children working there, lots of all kinds of people working there, but they would probably be pretty dirty, pretty hungry looking. They would have walked there through open sewage because there was no sewage pipes in that part of England at that time, and these big apartment buildings people lived in, they just dumped all the sewage into the streets. And so very unhealthy lifestyle people were living, breathing terrible air, being around disease and germs and stuff, and then working. How many hours did you work in the factory? Well, you got there at 6 in the morning and you left at like 10 at night. So that's not a short day if you're an 8-year-old kid. It's a 16-hour day. So when you're looking at this world and you say, is this a much better modern world than the villages people have come from to live in this? And all three of these thinkers could look at this and say, that something's not right about this. Children working in unhealthy conditions, this isn't better. And so they began to say something is not right about the modern world, something's sick about it. And so they aren't actually doctors, that's why I've got quotes around them. It's a metaphor, it's not really sick, the modern world, but it's a good way of comparing these guys and the way they think. And so each of them said there's a certain illness that is affecting the modern world. Each of them said there are certain symptoms that we can see in relation to this illness. Each of them had a certain prognosis or prediction about where things were headed if we don't fix things. And each of them had some ideas about what would be needed to fix things. And if we compare and contrast Karl Marx and Emil Durkheim and Max Weber's ideas about what's wrong with the modern world and what could be done to fix it, we'll have a pretty good sense of why they started sociology. And we'll have a pretty good sense of why the sociologies they started are different from one another. We'll get to this later, but Karl Marx is known as the founding father of conflict theory. So that's one of the first types of sociology we're going to spend time learning about. That's what we're going to get into after I introduce these founding fathers. Emil Durkheim is the founder of something called functionalism. So these are the types of sociology that they founded. Functionalism is the name of Durkheim's type of sociology. And symbolic interactionism, that's the hardest one to write out and say, but symbolic interactionism is the third type of sociology. So we'll get more into these later, but for now we want to focus on these guys. And again, I'm not focused on these guys as people. I don't want to spend too much time talking about their biographies or who they were. It's important to have some sense of when they were writing. And this is what's hard for students, is our sense of history. But Marx was writing in 1840s is when he started, up through about the 1860s. So this isn't when he lived, this is when he did most of his writing. And I'm showing you this to show that there was some overlap between these guys, but Marx definitely came first, Durkheim second, Weber third. Durkheim was writing in like the 1860s through the 1880s. And Weber is more like 1870s through early 1900s, the aughts of the 20th century. So there's a bit of overlap, and each one of these guys was aware of, Marx wasn't aware of Durkheim and Weber. I don't think he never knew of them, but Durkheim and Weber certainly knew about Marx. And a lot of the things they were writing were kind of in response to each other. So that's why I kind of start with Marx and see, well, what did he say? And what did the other guys say in response to that? And Marx is in some ways the most provocative too, and the one that's the most controversial. And so it's good to start with Marx and conflict theory. Marx said the problem with our modern world is capitalism. You hear a lot of people using the word capitalism nowadays. We didn't always use that word. Marxists did. Marxists said we're living under a system called capitalism, and most people said, nah, it's just life. It's just how it always is. But Marxists have always said, no, it's a specific system called capitalism that came into being at a certain time in human history, and we're still under it. And really, capitalism is the whole world. Like, if you're not a Marxist, you think the world is a bunch of different countries all fighting each other. But if you're a Marxist, you see that there really is just one capitalist system that we're all under. And so they try to understand, what is capitalism? If you're trying to understand the modern world, what is capitalism and how does it affect us and why is it making us sick? The symptoms Marx pointed to of it being a sick system have to do with how working people are treated. That's the main group he focuses on. We've talked about race, class, and gender being the big three in sociology, but for Marx, class is where the action is. If you want to understand your life and who you are sociologically, look at your class. And by class, he means, what's your relationship to the factory or to where production happens? Things are getting made in the world and people are using those things, but what's your relation to it? Are you a person that works with their hands to help make those things? Are you a person who sits in an office building and moves numbers around? Are you a guy on the tennis court who just checks his phone and sees how much his investments are going up? Some people don't do work in capitalism, they just get money from it. And other people are doing the work with the hands, and other people are doing more managerial work. But where are you in relation to the production? Are you a worker? Are you a manager? Are you an owner? And those classes are the key things that determine your life, as we're going to see, according to the Marxist perspective, according to this view. And so what are the symptoms? What's wrong with it? Well, one of the main ones is exploitation. I'll write these over here. Exploitation is what Marx is concerned about. Exploitation is basically when one person, well, in his terms, one class of people gets rich while another class of people is doing all the work for them. You know, when you go to your job, I don't know what kind of work you do, but if you work all day at McDonald's or something like that, and they paid you, you know, I don't know, $15 an hour, so 8 times 15, whatever that comes out to. How much money did they make from your work is a good question to ask yourself. But that's, so they pay you a certain amount, but they're hopefully, in their view, making a lot more from your work than you made from your work. And so that's what Marx calls exploitation. If you only have so much energy in your life to give on planet Earth, if a lot of the energy you're giving somebody else gets the benefit of, then Marx says that's not a fair system. A system where I have to work real hard and other people get rich while I just get by. I get to pay my rent and he gets to go ride on a boat and play tennis and stuff. Well, I just don't, you know, I mean, that's not a fair system. That's exploitative. It's like, you know, in the animal world, you see this happen sometimes. Certain animals take over another animal and make them do everything for them. But humans don't like it when people do that to us. And Marx said it's not a good system that does that. One system that where some people get rich while other people get poor is not going to end up being a healthy system. It's going to end up being one where there's a very small group of people that has everything and a whole big group that's got nothing. And I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, but if you look at planet Earth today, this idea that we have, that our overwhelming problem is inequality. I mean, we keep talking about immigration. All these people keep coming to our border. Why do they keep coming here? Well, inequality. There's no wealth to be made where they are, and there's wealth up here, so they're trying to come find a way to live. But if you have inequality, you know, and so exploitation is one of the problems with the capitalist system. It's a whole system based on some people work and other people get to get rich off it. And Marx says that's not going to work out very well in the long run. It's also a more complicated problem he sees with it is what he calls alienation. That's a complicated idea, but it's basically the idea that you don't get to be yourself in capitalism. You don't really get to be a full human being. It's dehumanizing. Capitalism, in a way to look at it, it's dehumanization. What is a human? A human is a creative person, according to Marx. Marx says all of us are creative. That's what makes us different than animals. Animals, according to him, just do what instinct kind of tells them to do. And individual animals aren't really that creative. Like my dog just tore up, I gave him a heart for Halloween, and he tore it all up, you know, which expressed himself, but all dogs would tear up their little heart toy. I mean, it's not a specific thing he thought of, like I'm gonna tear up my toy and spread it all over the floor. But when you decided how to decorate your room that you live in, or decided what to wear today to class, or decided what party you wanna have later, or when you made a little object, or you did your nails, I mean, all day long we're doing creative things. We're coming up with an idea in our head of how we want something to be, and then making it happen. And that ability to kind of abstract, to think in your head of an idea and then do it is, according to Marx, that's the creative act, and that's the thing that makes us human. We love being creative. We feel most ourselves when we are being creative, when we're getting to express ourselves. Like, look at this thing I made, look at this outfit I chose, look at this party I threw, look at this play I wrote, look at this movie I made, look at this song I sang. We're creative. But in capitalism, if you're a working person working 16 hours a day in a factory, just doing the same thing all day, you're not ever getting to be creative. You're not ever getting to be a human. And all day long, you're actually doing what animals do or what machines do. And you might say, well, when you get home, you get to be human. And Marx says, well, no, if you only have 8 hours at home, That's 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to go to the bathroom, 8 hours to eat, 8 hours to, have a little time with your wife maybe. But those are all animal functions, like going to the bathroom, eating, procreating, reproducing. Those are things all animals do. So if that's all you get to do as a worker is be an animal all day, you're never getting to be a full creative human. And so Marx says that's, again, not a good system where masses of people, large numbers of people in huge factories are treated like animals or robots or machines the whole day. They will not survive. They won't be happy, healthy humans. And what will they do? They may decide to revolt. They may decide to overthrow a system that treats them this way. And so Marx said, the capitalist system at root is an unhealthy system because it forces large numbers of people to live a life that's not natural to them. That's not what is a normal expectation of a human being, where I get to work for myself, take care of myself, and get to be human and be creative. And so what's the prognosis? Well, Marx thought capitalism was going to get a lot worse before it got better. Polarization is the word I'm writing here. To polarize is to pull apart into two halves. But in this case, the two halves are not at all equal. Capitalism leads to a situation where, as I mentioned, a small group of people at the top, the haves, have everything, basically. And a much larger group at the bottom, the have-nots, have very little. And, we're going to talk about this later when we analyze capitalism, but certainly there's a case to be made that America has gone down this road before, and then we tried to fix it. And now we're down that road again, where America is very unequal, and in fact, the whole world is very unequal as a capitalist system. And so Marx thought, if you get to a situation where you have 1% of the people at the top and the 99% at the bottom, and they're much bigger, and this group has all the money, and this group has none of the money, that's polarization, what I'm drawing here. That's not a healthy situation. That's a very imbalanced situation where you have large numbers of people that don't have enough. And what are they going to do? They're going to look at the small group of elites at the top with all their nice stuff and say, well, why is that? Why do you get all that nice stuff and we're starving here and our children are starving? So what will they do? What's the cure going to be? Marx predicted that the worldwide working class eventually is going to all come together as a worldwide working class and overthrow this capitalist system. And they're going to stop worrying about what race somebody is or what country somebody's from or what gender somebody claims, and they're going to see each other as fellow working people. And when you're working people, you will come together and create a new kind of society that is much more in favor of working people, not just in favor of owning people. And so Marx was saying a working class revolution, a workers' revolution, is what is in store for capitalism. He almost thought it was inevitable that working people eventually will become so poor and so numerous that they will have to come together to overthrow capitalism. Now, he seemed to think it was inevitable, but at the same time, he was an activist trying to make it happen and going out there and making speeches and joining demonstrations and rallies. So as much as he might have thought it was inevitable, he obviously thought there was a need to kind of try and make it happen too. So it's not you could say it's a prediction of the future, but it's also a kind of hope that he had that working people would come together and overthrow capitalism. And there have been a lot of Marxist movements and workers' movements and workers' liberation movements around the world that have tried to, kind of do what Marx said and bring working people together across these lines that capitalism likes these lines. It likes to say, you're white, you get paid more than this person who's black or brown. Capitalism likes to separate people by race, or to say, you guys are Palestinian, you don't get this, but you're Israeli and you get this. I mean, to separate people by nation. Capitalism likes that as well. But Marx thought the natural human thing is for humans to come together because they're all human. And they're really actually part of one thing, not a bunch of separate things. So that's the kind of hope or dream of the Marxist viewpoint. But like I said, it was going to get worse before it got better. Well, Durkheim could read Marx, and Durkheim could easily see the same things Marx could see in places like England, where working kids are working 18 hours a day and getting paid nothing and living in very subhuman situations. So why doesn't he agree with Marx that this is the story, the only story to be told about the modern world? Well, he thinks that this is a temporary bad situation, that yes, it's certainly exploitative and what's going on, but it's not the normal way that humans would treat each other. If humans are treating each other this way, according to Durkheim, there's something wrong with their morality. Not with the system. There's an economic system, and according to him, an economic system is just an economic system, and it isn't necessarily good or bad. But if people are mistreating each other, like asking other people's children to work 16 hours a day for them and not pay them anything, that's like a moral problem. That means in your heart, you don't care about these kids, and you don't see them as fellow humans, and you don't want to treat them well. And so Durkheim says that kind of moral problem, you can't just change the economic system and then everybody's morality will be fixed. Something is more deep in people's hearts is what needs changing, not just the structure. So we talked about like structure and culture. Structure is who has what, and Marx is definitely focused on the who has what situation, and the structure is very unequal. But Durkheim's saying, but there's also the who thinks and feels what, what's going on in people's hearts and minds. And if owning people are willing to mistreat working people and make them work 16 hours a day for no pay, that suggests something's wrong with their heart, not just something's wrong with who has what in the society. So it's a moral problem, and where does this moral problem come from, according to Durkheim? Well, he thinks the real problem is what he calls the complex. I'll write it over here. So now we're talking about Durkheim. And he, like I said, learning any field is kind of learning a language. And so they're talking about the same thing, but they're kind of using different terms and terminology, ways of talking about the same thing. And how you talk about it kind of shapes how you see it. So Durkheim is who I'm talking about over here. And he says the problem is the complex division of labor. The complex division of labor in society. I hope these notes are showing up at home. By the way, if you didn't know where, I have these lecture notes on Canvas, so you can try to find those there. If you have any trouble, let me know. But all of this is written much more clearly in those notes because it's typed up. So what does complex division of labor mean? Well, it's the question of who does what in society. Division of labor. Labor is how much, what work needs to get done. And any group of people has labor that needs to get done. Think of your own household. I don't know what kind of household you live in. In my household, we have a division of labor. Things, who does what. Like, for example, we just had a storm, so there were a lot of branches outside. Whose job is it to go pick up all the big branches? It's kind of my job. But there were a bunch of sticks all over too, and whose job was it to pick up the little sticks and put them in the bin? My kids. I said, go pick them up. Who does the cooking? Actually, I do the cooking in my house mostly, but who does a lot of the cleaning? My wife does. So people, divide up tasks. When I went to camp, summer camp, we had a chore wheel. A wheel with all the names of the different chores, and then another wheel with all the names of the campers, and they would spin it every day to see who does what. Well, in a society too, we have that question, who does what, and what's a complex division of labor, and how is that different from what existed before? Well, just think of a village versus a city. If you think of village as the pre-modern thing that most people lived under in the pre-modern times, and a city as the modern thing, then if we're trying to understand what's wrong with the modern world, thinking about cities and how they're different from villages is helpful. And I've mentioned some of this already. But think of the division of labor. In a village, there's very simple division of labor. In a city, there's a complex one. I won't write the whole thing. This is simple and this is complex. What do we mean by simple and complex? Well, in a village, there's really only two jobs available. You're either growing food and doing the farming, or you're doing craft work, either like a woodworker or a metal worker or a leather worker, or you're out in the fields doing farm stuff. And in the village, most people can do both. Like if we need more people planting, the bricklayer guy's gonna go out and do planting. If we need more bricklayers, some of the farmers are gonna come in and help lay bricks. I mean, it's not like we have very specialized jobs where, sorry, I can't help because I only know how to do sociology. Like in our modern world, we have very specialized jobs. I know how to program, Apple computers. Well, can you program IBM? No. Apple computer. You know what I'm saying? Like people have very specific specialized jobs in the modern world, whereas in the pre-modern world, things were much more simple in terms of who does what. Basically agriculture and crafts. And craft labor. But in a big modern city, you have industrial, production. So for example, you have a big factory, you have to have people that know how to run the machines, you have to have people that know how to fix the machines, you have to have people that know how to be accountants, you have to have people that know how to be statisticians, you have to have people that know how to do managerial work, there's all kinds of job specifications in a big modern company. And to learn those, where do you have to go? You have to go to college, for example. One reason a lot of you are right here, right now, is because it's a complicated division of labor. If you were living in a small village in Mexico or something like that, you probably wouldn't be in school right now. You'd probably be doing labor. But here in a modern, complex society like you Sutter, you go to school to get those better jobs. Anyway, what else is different about it? Well, in the village life, home and work are the same thing. Really, there is no real distinction. You live at your farm and you work at your farm. Or if you're a carpenter, you might live at the carpenter shop and work at the carpenter shop. It's just all part of the same thing. Whereas in big cities, there's a big separation between home and work. We leave home to go to work. We wake up in the morning and we go away from our family. We leave our children there and we go work over there. And that's a very different kind of world. It may not seem like a big difference, but a lot of the issues people face, and I can tell you as somebody with kids, have to do with this fact that I'm not with my family all day. I go away from them to go work. And what does that mean? Well, for one thing, it means that people are much more, the big thing is group life is much more, this has a lot of social similarity. You live in a village, everyone's similar to each other. You can write this down under social similarity, but we eat the same foods. We all eat the same stuff. We all pray to the same God. We have the same religion. We go to the same church. We all speak the same language. We all have the same history because it's our village history. We all share that. Whereas if you live in a big city, you have a whole bunch of social diversity. You live on an apartment building hall, for example, and you might not know any of the neighbors in your apartment building. And their lifestyles are very different than you because they have very different labor activities. Like you might wake up at 6 in the morning, but they're going to bed at 6 in the morning because they worked all night. And you might be cooking, rice and beans at your house, but they're cooking, curry at their house. And you might go, to the Catholic Church and they go to the Sikh temple or something like that. We're all over the place. And so how are we supposed to get along with these people that eat differently, that think differently, that pray differently? This is what concerned Durkheim, is that in this modern world, people aren't going to know how to really treat each other. That really what it is much more individualism. The key, if you want to boil down Durkheim to his concerns about what's wrong with the modern world, it's that people are too individualistic. Like if you live in a city, like let's say you're a young person right now and you move away from Yuba City to go to college, like my daughter's in college right now. She lives in an apartment with another kid her same age. There's no adults around. I'm not there to watch what she inhales or doesn't inhale or eats or doesn't eat or who she has over or not. She's totally in charge of herself. in that sense. And a lot of us, as individual people living in big cities, are totally in charge of ourselves, which we call freedom. And freedom is nice and all, but Durkheim worried if you're too free, you won't know how to live. You won't have anyone telling you that's too much food to eat. That's too much, naked people on your computer you've been looking at. That's too much stuff you're shooting into your veins and your arms. I mean, there's all kinds of self-destructive behaviors that you might engage in. If you don't have what's called social regulation, you don't have the local priest, the local grandpa, the local grandma, I mean, people watching over you who say, hey, that's not appropriate behavior. In other words, where does morality come from? If the problem with the modern world is a lack of morality, where people are treating each other poorly, morality, according to Durkheim, comes from your group. As an individual, you have no morality. If you're just an individual in the forest, you'll do whatever. But once you're living with people, people are the ones who other people give us expectations about how to act and how to be. And if you don't have anyone that you're really dealing with, because you live all by yourself in your apartment, you don't really have morality. You don't really have anybody telling you from the outside, here's how you should live. You have your internal thing telling you, I'm hungry, I'm gonna go eat, I'm gonna eat the whole ice cream. I'm gonna go, snort a bunch of stuff up my nose or whatever it is. But if you're in a village, you have more regulation of your behavior. And so that's Durkheim's big concern in the modern world, is we don't really have anything to regulate our internal desires and appetites. And so therefore, if you're a business owner and you want to make $1 million and you're like these 16-year-olds, these 10-year-olds will work for, 16-hour days for no money, and that'll make me $1 million really quick, like, why wouldn't you? What's telling you not to? There's no reason I shouldn't. They're not my kids. They're not connected to me. They don't go to my church. I don't know them. I don't know their parents. So it's nothing on me. But if you were in a village, you wouldn't be doing that to other people's kids. They would all know about it. They would all have words with you, and you would be either something bad would happen to you for treating people badly. But in this big city environment of an individualistic world where people aren't really controlling each other, then people can do bad things to each other. So Durkheim said that's what we need to think about. How do we bring back that sense of morality, that sense of I've got to be a good person because other people are observing my behavior and regulating it. The symptom he called for this was anomie. Anomie means no rules. Anomie. Nomie, as we're going to learn, a big idea for functionalism is norms. Or when I said group expectations, what other people expect of us, that's what we call norms. And obeying norms, going along with what our group expects of us, is a big idea for functionalism, for this type of sociology. To say if we're going to actually function well as a group, we have to have rules that we follow, and we have to be willing to follow them with each other, and willing to enforce them on each other. But in this modern world, we seem to have a no rules kind of attitude. I do what I want. We ever watch that show? What was that show? Or something like that. And you just do what you want, and nobody can tell you not to do it. And but really, that no rules, it really means disconnectedness. Because if you're really connected to other people, you will have rules. That's what groups do to each other. By the way, so we're not really a group. We're, in this class, I would say right now, we're a bunch of free-floating individuals that happen to come to this class. But the more that we do come to this class, the more we're becoming a group. And one way you can see that is that we've started to create rules. You guys have, I didn't. What rules have you started to create in here? Did you come new to the class or late to the class?
Today?
No, in the semester.
Yeah. I started a week late.
And you're way over there. I was talking about what kind of rules are we following? Well, one rule is like where people sit. That's one thing. In a classroom, you guys just kind of decide, and I don't say it, but people do it, and day after day, you end up sitting in the same chairs. And maybe the fact that you're sitting over there, I don't know why, but it's a sign that maybe you don't feel part of the group yet. You came late, I'm new. Maybe you will always, the whole semester, be the new kid. But I don't think so. At a certain point, we're gonna have to bring her over and say, you get to be part of the group. Or maybe the group will spread out and include her, I don't know. But what I'm saying is groups start making rules, and that's one of the things that makes them a group, is that they have shared expectations of each other. And if you don't follow the expectations, you may get kicked out of the group or not be part of it. And if you're following the expectations of a group, then people are like, okay, yeah, you're one of us. But as soon as you start doing things that the group doesn't like, they'll be like, dude, you're not one of us, I guess. You go out there. And so Durkheim says that that's what humans need is connectedness. They need to be connected to each other, and that's what gives them their morality. But in this modern world where everything's been uprooted from how it used to be in the pre-modern world, people have left their villages, they've gone to big cities, everything's new. They don't know how to treat each other, and they're suffering from anomie. Where does he see this going? He sees that, well, what is the cause of the anomie? The cause is specialization. So in other words, this is another term for the complex division of labor. The reason we're disconnected is because we're all doing different things with our lives in this economic system that we're part of. We're specialized, meaning you specialize on something specific that you do that nobody else can do or very few people can do. And that's like what we have to figure out in our modern world. In fact, my kids are trying to figure this out right now, and they're only 7 years old and 10 years old. And my 7-year-old is sure he wants to be in the NBA. Like, Dad, definitely, I'm going to specialize on playing basketball, pro basketball. I'm like, good luck with that, But I have to try and explain to him, there's only so many people that get to play it, and and then my wife's like, why are you crushing his dreams? Let him say he wants to be in the NBA. But this whole question of what do you want to get good at, and put aside the other things. And I mean, one of the things I'm trying to say to him is, once you get paid to do something, you might not love it as much anymore. Once it becomes your work, it's not exactly the thing you choose to do and love doing all the time. So, but this thing of specializing, we have to find this thing that we're good at and try really hard to be good at it and try to make money at it. That's kind of the pressure that's on all of us. That's why you're in school. You don't just become a worker, you have to pick which industry, and you have to pick which degree you want to get, and you have to pick which even advanced specialty within that degree. So like, you might just say, I want to be a nurse. Well, then they go, okay, well, what kind of nurse? And what will be your specialty of nursing? And so we have to find our specialty, the special thing we do, and that reflects this complicated world we're in. And what's the cause of that? Well, basically population. If you have a lot of people available, then people have to figure out what can they do that's different. In a village, you don't necessarily have a lot of people available. You have a couple hundred people to get all the work done. So people don't specialize, they just are generalists. They can do a lot of stuff. But in a big city, when there's millions of people and you're trying to pay your rent, you're like, well, I better get good at this one thing that other people can't, so I can get paid for it. And that specialization is what leads people to have very different lifestyles, leads them to have different hours that they go to work, different types of work they do, different college experiences and learning experiences, and we end up being very different adults from each other. We often feel much more connected to the people we work with than we do, say, to the people at church or to our family or things like that, because our specialty has become so much of who we are. And Durkheim said there would be further specialization, like things are going to get even more specialized. And if you went to his university 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you would see I don't know how many majors there was in a French university in the 1800s. Not that many majors. But if you were to go look at a university catalog now at University of California, Berkeley, how many different things could I study here? What could I go into? And there's hundreds of majors. So that's a sign that he was right, that things were going to get even more specialized in the future as the population grew, as technology developed, there'd be more and more things to specialize in. And that means more and more disconnection from each other. And that means more and more immorality, people mistreating each other in various ways. And so if he were to come back today, he'd say, well, look at all the people addicted to drugs. That proves what I'm saying. Look at all the homeless people. That proves what I'm saying. Look at all the people with various kinds of mental health problems and, problems just keeping their bodies healthy. This all shows that people are not regulated, that they don't know how to live, and that they're missing something they need to be happy human campers. And the whole COVID, I think, helped prove what Durkheim said. If people are disconnected, if they spend all their time in their own house without connecting to other people, they may lose the ability to relate to other people, and various problems can flow from that. Mental health problems, again, crime problems, other kinds of issues. And so Durkheim's basically saying we human beings need other people to help us be ourselves. You can't just be a pure individualist, because humans are social creatures. It's like trying to imagine an ant. I'm just going to strike out on my own and be my own kind of ant. I don't need the anthill. Well, that ant's not going to live. He's not going to make it. And Durkheim thinks it's a big misconception we have that we as individuals can just go be on our own. I see all these guys with "don't tread on me" stickers and stuff like that. I'll just take care of myself. Okay. But human beings generally need whole villages to be able to survive. You can't run a farm all by yourself, by the way. You can't probably grow enough food for your family all by yourself. And even if you could kill enough food, there's bad years where there aren't enough deer to eat or fish to catch. So it's not about that. But anyway, so what is the cure? His cure didn't go anywhere, I don't think. But he said occupational groups is what he imagined. What he was advocating here was the idea that we need to bring home life and work life back together. That's really the big separation of the modern world. We leave our families and our homes to go to work, and we spend time with working other people that we work with. But what if you lived with the people you worked with? Like the way it is now in our society, you live where you can afford to live. So you end up living in a neighborhood that you can afford. And that means everybody in your neighborhood's in the same boat financially. So you see the way it is in our world, we have like poor neighborhoods where all the poor people live, and middle class neighborhoods where all the people who can buy starter homes live. And then, nice, quote unquote, nice areas where the wealthy people live. And if people are living totally separate from each other, if your rich boss lives way in another part of town and he never sees your children, he never sees the schools your children go to, he never sees the parks they play in, then he doesn't care what exploitation he's doing to you. I don't care how much I'm paying you or not. Just go save it some more money or something, dude. But if he actually if his kids had to play at the park your kids played at, if his kids had to go to the school your kids go to, if he had to go to the same hospital where you get health care, would he see your poverty as not his problem? Or would he say, I see what they're up against, I see what they're dealing with, maybe I should pay them a little more, maybe we should have a healthcare plan, maybe we should have, after school programs for the workers' kids. So Durkheim was just trying to say, the way we have it now, as long as work and home are separate, then people can live with other rich people or with people of their class, but if they're just living that way, they're not really seeing their connections to each other. Bosses need workers. They shouldn't be wanting to exploit them and make their lives miserable. But if you never see the condition of your employees, you're never going to want to treat them right. And so Durkheim said, we need to find a way to bring work life and home life back together. And so he imagined, for example, like Plumas Lake is a neighborhood where I used to live here. It's a bunch of people that, could afford to buy homes, and that's why they all live there. But other than that, they don't have much in common. But what if Plumas Lake was like the medical community? And all the people living there were like nurses and doctors and EMTs and rad tech people. They were all connected by their work, and they all lived together. And then across town in Wheatland, you had the military community where all the soldiers and generals and pilots and mechanics all lived. And then maybe over here in Edgewater, you'd have the education community and professors and students and administrators. That was kind of what Durkheim was imagining, that your home life and your work life would be much more connected. I don't know that this idea ever has come to anything. Did the workers' revolution come to anything? Well, there have been some revolutions in countries that were called communist revolutions, like Russia had a revolution, Cuba had a revolution, China had a revolution, Vietnam. But Marx would have said, and this is one of the reasons he said he wasn't a Marxist, is I'm talking about a worldwide working class revolution, all the workers of the whole planet Earth coming together to overthrow this global system of capitalism, not just one country having a revolution. So even Marx would say, we haven't had that happen yet, where the whole working class of planet Earth comes together and overthrows capitalism. And he would say, it may happen one day. We haven't had acquisition. What about the third predictor? Well, in some ways, some people say Weber's views of where things were headed were the most accurate. Weber, we spell it Weber, but we pronounce it Weber in sociology. That's the German way of pronouncing it. His name isn't necessarily the most famous, but I think that you've probably encountered ideas of his before. For example, have you ever heard the term work ethic? Oh, that person has a good work ethic. Weber's famous for coming up with that idea of the Protestant work ethic, and we're going to talk about that later in this class. He also is known for predicting the rise of, we'll talk about it in a second. Weber thought that these guys were correct to a certain extent, but they didn't have a complicated enough picture of human history. In other words, if you only studied European history, and not be aware of what happened in Asia over the centuries or Africa, then you don't really understand all of humanity and its history. And Weber felt that he had a better understanding of all of human history than Marx and Durkheim, because he had studied it. He'd studied Asian religion and Asian history and some about Africa. And so when he's trying to write sociology, he says we need to take into account all of humanity and their experiences, not just basically white European history. And so, so when you look at it from that perspective, is capitalism a brand new thing that humans have never experienced before? And Weber says, well, no, it isn't, because you can find capitalism in ancient China and ancient Rome. And so if by capitalism we mean a system where some people work for wages and other people pay them to work for them, then that kind of system isn't all that new, and it has existed in other times and places. So Weber says if our world is sick, it can't just be because of capitalism, because other times and places have had capitalism and they weren't sick in the way we are. So if we're trying to figure out what is the thing causing our sickness, it can't just be capitalism. What about the complex division of labor? Have there been other societies where there were lots of jobs people could choose and those jobs would be very different from other jobs people were doing? Yes, those are complicated societies, and ancient China was such a place where you had a very big, government with all kinds of jobs people could do. Ancient Byzantium, there was a Byzantine Empire, and we still use the term Byzantine. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. If somebody says something's Byzantine, they mean it's way too complicated. And what they're referring to is the Empire of Byzantium, that also had a very complicated system of all the different jobs people could get and all the different things they could do. And so Weber says this complexity of our world, that's not that new. Humans have done that before. And again, they didn't have the illnesses that we have nowadays, like children being exploited for 16 hours a day. So what is the thing that's distinct, that's new about about the modern world? Weber says it's rationalization. Rationalization, that's a term that has different meanings, but reason, the root of the term is reason, and yeah, the modern world is supposed to be based on using reason rather than other ways of thinking. Like, we don't base our decisions on like asking the oracle, like let's go pray to the statue and decide what to do. We try to use like reason in the modern world. And so rational, to do things rationally, is to do things efficiently, to maximize gain and minimize loss. When we say somebody's acting rationally, we say they're trying to maximize gain, they're trying to get the most they can get, and they're trying to spend as little as possible, because that's rational behavior. You, by the way, in this class, I can tell you're not fully rational. Is there a more rational way you could have taken this class than what you're doing? Is there a way you could maximize your sociology you're getting, but minimize the cost of getting your sociology? Is there another way to do it at this school than the way you're doing it?
Online.
Online. Online is very rational. You don't spend money on gas. You don't have to actually physically be here. There's all kinds of efficiencies in having things online. That's why the school likes it too. And in fact, they could probably come up with a system where they don't even need to have me anymore. They could like be using all these recordings I'm making and just put those online and fire me, and then just have the class be taught by the computer, for the next 20 years. That's what everyone's worried about with AI. It's a very efficient thing. It gets a lot done for very little cost. That's why lots of people are worried I'll lose my job with all this technology. And in the modern world, we're always pushing towards maximizing gain and minimizing loss. But is that the only way to make your decisions? Like, you didn't do the rational thing. You came here. Why are you taking the live synchronous class when an online asynchronous class would be much more efficient, much more rational?
Because in person, it's better.
Because what?
It's better in person.
It feels better in person. You like it better. You feel more connected to other people. You feel more human. You feel like I have other people watching me, and maybe that helps me keep me in line a little bit. In other words, yeah, we humans are irrational to a certain extent. We like being with other humans. I mean, think of a car. When you buy a car, do you only do, what's the rational reasons to buy a car? What would you, if you're trying to think about which car to buy, what factors would you look at if you were trying to be purely rational?
Yes.
Yeah, like how much mileage does it get? How much does the car cost, first of all? Maybe I'll get a used one. Because as soon as you drive a new one off the lot, it lost 20% of its value. So if you're trying to maximize your car cost, you probably want to buy a used one. You probably want to get one with good mileage. Is that the car you really wanted? What's the car you really want? A certain color, a certain speed, in other words. I mean, there are emotional reasons we like driving, but they're not rational. And so if you always do everything for purely rational reasons, according to Weber, you're again not being fully human, because we human beings have an emotional side to us. We have irrational things. Sometimes we don't want to maximize our gain, and we just want to do something because we like it that way. And trying to create a whole society that's as rational as possible is maybe not going to lead to good outcomes for these human critters that are going to live in that society, because human critters are not fully rational beings. Robots are. If you ask robots to live in a fully rational society where everything was done to maximize gain and minimize cost, robots would be totally happy with it. Especially if they were programmed to value, rational decision making. But humans aren't really programmed that way. And so what's the problem with that rationalization? Well, he said the problem is disenchantment. I'll write that over here. So you see that, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but disenchantment is kind of like alienation and like anomie. It's a kind of psychological state we're talking about here that people are put into by this modern world. Disenchantment is where things are no longer, things lost, are meaningless, in other words. Meaningless and mundane or boring. When something's enchanted, it's magical, it's meaningful, it's wonderful, it's exciting. Like Disneyland likes to say it's the enchanted kingdom or something like that. In Spanish, sometimes when you meet somebody, you say, I'm enchanted to meet you. It's so magical to meet you. But what's the opposite of enchanted? When things are just totally predictable, they're totally meaningless in a way. Like, for example, let's compare an enchanted forest, which they talk about like in Disney movies and stuff. compare that to how we would think of a forest in the modern world. In the enchanted forest, every single tree is thought to have a spirit in it. And every single tree is different from every other tree because each one has a little living spirit in it. And there's other spirits around in the rocks and flowers and stuff. I mean, the whole place is magical. There's all kinds of life going on, all kinds of different stories going on in that forest. And it's an amazing place. In the modern world, though, you might look at that same group of trees and say, oh, it's lumber. That's a resource we can exploit. We could cut down that lumber and use it to build things. The modern world, explains everything. It sees it in totally scientific terms, and it takes this sort of larger meaning out of things. And trees are no longer things with spirits in them. They're just lumber. And there's a lot of things like that. If you think about it, that in the pre-modern world, things were maybe not as efficient, but they were more human. For example, when you used to go to the doctor, you didn't go to the doctor came to you. The doctor knew you, he rode on horseback to your house, you were in your bed, and he came and treated you, and he knew you, and he knew your mom and dad because he's the same doctor. It was the family doctor. You felt like you were being treated by a healing person. Whereas nowadays, you go to the doctor and it's an HMO, a health maintenance organization, and you are asked to wait online and you fill out this form and that form, and if it's not on the form, then we don't trust you. But doc, I've been feeling, no, it's not on the form. But doc, I can tell you I did get a vaccine. No, not on your form. In other words, we're not really treated as humans. In the modern world, we're treated as cases, like in a file. You show up at your job, and what's your ID number? What's your employment number? You show up at the government. What's your social security number? You go, everything we're treated as numbers. We're treated as cases in a file, but we're not feel like we're treated as human beings by our medical providers or other kinds of providers, education providers. We move you through. You must have an appointment with a counselor. You must come up with that plan. You must be out of here in 3 to 4 years or 2 years or whatever. They used to say, by the way, in community college, we used to have all these classes that were just to learn. They called them community enrichment. You could just take classes just because you want to learn some music. You could take it. They got rid of all those recently. They're like, learn to just learn. Why? That's not rational. You need to be progressing towards a degree, and we want to know which degree you're progressing to, and we need to have you do it, and your time to degree needs to be as short as possible. So in other words, I'm trying to give you examples. Or like McDonald's. McDonald's, billions and billions served. They all got served the exact same Big Mac. Did you really feel like you got a wonderful meal prepared for you? I'd much rather go to my grandma and have her make me a cheeseburger than go stand online and eat the same Big Mac everybody else ate. But in the modern world, we're treated more and more like robots is really what we're getting at. What it creates is bureaucracy. That's his prognosis for, well, I really should, no, sorry. Bureaucracy kind of goes with disenchantment. Bureaucracy are these big things that we're part of, like our big HMO, health maintenance organization, or a big college like this, or a big government like the US government, or big companies that you deal with and you have to call them up, and you are fifth in line on our phone system to talk to our computer. You're treated as a machine, and so bureaucracy are these structures that are created to manage large numbers of people. Like our businesses are bureaucracies, our government is bureaucratic, churches sometimes are bureaucratic, hospitals are bureaucratic. And it's that bureaucracy that makes you feel like you're just a robot or just a machine and not a human. And Durkheim, Braver thought this would get worse before it got better. It would get to a point where people feel like they're trapped in an iron cage, is the word he used. And you hear people today using terms like this. People talk about the rat race. I feel like I want to get out of the rat race. Well, when you get in your metal car on a freeway with thousands of other cars and you're inching just to get to work so you can make your boss a bunch of money, it can feel like you're a rat in a cage more than like a human being making your own choices about how to live. And people talk about being on the treadmill of life. I get up, I go to work, I come home, I get up, I do it again. And rats are on treadmills like that. And so we feel like we're in a cage, a lot of us, and caged in our small homes, in our small cars, in our small cubicles at work. We feel like we're trapped. in a lot of our modern world, of modern things that we have to do in the modern rational world. There is, in other words, no spontaneous enjoyment is another way that that Weber put it. Spontaneous enjoyment means in the spur of the moment, are you able to do what you want to do? Like if it's a nice day and the sun's out after a bunch of rain, could we just not have class and just go take a walk in the fresh air? No, because we have a structure, we have a schedule. This class is from 10 till 11:15 a.m. Tuesday, Thursday, so no walk for us. But in the pre-modern world, if people just felt like it's a nice day and we don't want to work today, let's just take off. We'll get things done tomorrow. Or there were like a lot of religious holidays. I mean, in the small pre-modern village, there's a lot of days of the year where you're not working because you're doing religious stuff. But again, in this modern world, we have to make money our main thing that we do, and we do it every day, all day long, and we rarely get a chance to just do whatever the heck we want in whatever way we want. And so it feels like an iron cage, and Durkheim and Weber said this again, it's going to be something that isn't set right with people, and they're going to try to get out of it some way or another. He was worried that what they would look for is charismatic leaders. That word has become kind of popular again. I hear my kids saying, Dad, you got no riz. I don't know if you've ever heard of riz, but riz is short for charisma. And what's charisma? Charisma is riz. No, what? Charisma is this personal magnetism, this thing where people just think you're hot stuff. People just want to follow you. Can you think of anybody in our world today that seems to have a lot of charisma, where lots of people just want to follow that person and do whatever that person might think is right? Any examples of that? There's no figures that lots of people are paying attention to?
Social media influencers?
Yeah, maybe. They're not that famous. Can you think of, I mean, name one. I don't know, Pete Davidson? I don't know. I don't even know who they are. But yeah, I guess young people follow them. Is there anybody else? Like on the traditional media influencers? We've got a Super Bowl coming up this Sunday. Anybody you can think of related to that? I don't know, I think of like Taylor Swift, for example, as somebody who has a lot of charisma and lots of people love her and want to follow her and whatever she says. So like she said, hey, followers, Swifties, will you guys sign up to vote? And 35,000 of them did. And so meanwhile, there's another kind of cult in America that's very upset about the cult around Swift. What's the other cult that's upset about Swift? That's the Trump cult. And they're like, Swifty's going to get all her supporters to vote for, Democrats. And so anyway, what I'm getting at is we have celebrities, social media influencers, but even more so celebrities in our modern world. People get obsessed with them, whether they're Kardashians or Kanye Wests or Taylor Swifts or Donald Trumps or whoever they are, but people get very obsessed with those people. And they seem to want those people to come along and give them something they're not getting. A lot of people want Trump to come and make America great again. And they're willing to do things like when he said, come to the Capitol, it's going to be wild. They did. And he's being charged with crimes now for doing that. But the point being is, when people feel trapped and like they have no way out, they may look for somebody to come and lead them out in a movement. And so when I asked, did this workers' revolution ever happen? Was Marx right about that? Maybe, maybe not. Did we all organize in occupational groups? Is anyone still talking about that? Not really. In the 20th century, though, can you think of any examples of charismatic leaders who got large numbers of people to follow them and to actually follow them for irrational reasons? In other words, charisma is not rational. We follow this person and we'll just do whatever they say, even if it's not rational. Can you think of anybody like that in the 20th century? I'm giving you a hint. Have you ever seen this salute? Hitler gave this salute, and millions of Germans gave this salute. And do whatever Hitler said. What did Hitler say? We're going to take over the whole planet. Germany is going to dominate the whole planet. All the rest of humans, we're going to control them. Let's go. And they're like, all right. Was it a rational goal? No. Did they achieve it? No. Did they end up getting Germany destroyed? Yes, for a while. Did large numbers of people die? Yes. I mean, was it a good goal in terms of advancing anything? Not really, but large numbers of people were willing to just go along with it because they felt that it was going to somehow make their lives meaningful again, bring back something to care about, something to really get passionate about. And so there's a lot of examples of that, and it wasn't just Germany. In Russia, they had Stalin, and large numbers of people followed Stalin. Here in America, at that same time, we had Roosevelt. Roosevelt got elected 4 times to be president. They had to pass a law to limit how many times you can be president because of Roosevelt. But people were going to make him king too. So there was a period in the 20th century, in the 1940s, when a lot of what Weber was saying, people are just willing to give up their freedom, give up their rationality, go follow blindly some ruler and do whatever that ruler says. That is what Weber was talking about. And he thinks it comes from this underlying disenchantment people have with the modern world, and they're looking for something to enchant them again. And so it isn't just charismatic leaders like Trump, and I could have mentioned Obama. There was a lot of people kind of wanting to cult up around Obama and around Trump. So cults, by the way, are exactly the kind of thing that Weber's talking about here. People get really fed up with their own normal lives, and they want to go join something that seems bigger, more meaningful than their lives would otherwise be. But cults, end up sometimes doing very irrational things, like the Jonestown Massacre. All these people were told by their cult leader, drink Kool-Aid and then you'll enter some new, universe. And yeah, they all died, but that wasn't a rational choice they made. And so some people say Weber was the most correct in terms of predicting what was wrong with our modern world, is that it disenchants people and makes people very eager to kind of give up their freedom and rationality and go join something. And so if it isn't political movements like Trumpism, it can also, or cults like the Jim Jones cult or the David Koresh cult or things like that. It can be things like just celebrity worship or other kinds of cultures people get into to kind of make their lives meaningful. I've been worried about my son's getting really into video games and what's that Fortnite and stuff like that, and I'm wanting him to look up from his peers. So there's a whole world out here that's full of magical things. There's nature, there's other things, but he's totally focused on that. So anyway, I see you're getting ready to pack up. I don't know where we are on time, but we will come back then on Thursday and begin talking about not just founding fathers, but these 3 perspectives. I call them types of sociology, but a good way to think of them is as like lenses. That when you put on a certain kind of lens, the world, or filter, like on a camera, certain thing, the world looks a certain way. When you take off that filter and put on a different filter, the world looks very different. And so if you look at the social world through the conflict theory filter, you're going to see certain things will pop out and certain things will make a lot of sense. On the other hand, if you look at it through the functionalist lens, it will look a lot different. Look at it through the symbolic interactions lens. So we will come back to these lenses or perspectives or types, whatever you want to call them, on Thursday. Oh shoot, I did it again. Shared my screen and didn't unshare.